Hello, Sacred Geometry Decoded, SGD here, and this will be Science of the Symbols, Part 12. And for the last few episodes and the next few, we'll be looking at alchemical symbols and how they cross between especially astronomical or astrological symbols, especially the planets and the zodiac. And as an example, Stephan Michelspacher, this quite important alchemist, hermeticist, and this is a reprint of one of his older books. Now, this is also why Stephan Michelspacher, previous episode, went into some of the aspects here. And another one of his that's from the used now as the title page, but well, especially alchemical symbols, what we have there, and there. So that's sulfur, for instance. And we'll go more in future episodes anyway. So another one of his, and again what we have is alchemical and planetary symbols of the caduceus, or the Mercury, as in Hermes, Hermeticism, or the god, or the planet and the element Mercury, which is the prima materia, or Azoth, as is called in Hermeticism. This is also one by Stephan Michelspacher. And so we see here, now this was our previous episode, went into this a little bit, but now we'll be comparing some of the aspects of these two particular illustrations. Now before I go on, what we have around is the zodiac sign, so the 12 signs of the zodiac, and each of them we can see underneath there is an alchemical symbol connected to them, for instance sulfur once again. And see the similar now we get the basic similarity with the cross and the triangle on top there, and we get the same here. Now we have the 7 gods, or the 7, so Venus, Mars, Sun, Mercury, Moon, Jupiter and Saturn, which are still their astronomical symbols, but these are also alchemical symbols. And so for instance here we see copper, iron, gold, mercury, and mercury being the Azoth, or the prima materia, as they say in this alchemical school, silver, tin, lead, Saturn, Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, Sun, Mars and Venus. Just a close-up of what we got there. Now this is another one of his drawings, and we see the same thing happening here with his, let's just call it a pyramid or a triangle of these aspects, with the Sun, the Moon, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter and Mercury. We can see their symbols there. For instance, Mars, the god of war, Venus, Saturn with the child and the scythe, obvious reference, Jupiter and the thunderbolt, and the Kundalini or the caduceus of Mercury. There we see the same, the child and the scythe of Saturn, and Mercury, even the moon, the crescent, and the sun, king, that alchemical wedding of sun and moon. And what we have is, well, underneath those 7, we have another 5. So they just, with the sun, again, we're missing the sun and the moon, but we have, well, they connect as above, so below the alchemical wedding of sun and moon. And then we have Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn once more. As above, so below, this Hermetic principle. As above, so below. We can see as above, so below. And even they form a vesica, but that's, you can read that into it, but let's just leave that for the moment. And another look at a key repeated feature, so whether it's Kircher or Fludd, or as we see Michelspacher or Khunrath, we see the tetragrammaton, which was a mathematical symbol as well as a spiritual alchemical symbol as well. And the alchemical wedding of sun and moon, that rebus principle, where we see the male and the female aspect drawn together. Now even we see with the Christ figure in the middle, and then we can even see the wound given to him by Longinus. But what's important here is the triple crown concept. So we see the Sun King, 1, 2, 3 crowns. Now another work of Michelspacher, what's this key figure? Now again, alchemical symbols, astronomical, the signs of the zodiac, and lots of alchemical references there, but he's wearing a triple crown once again. There we see the triple crown and the triple crown. This is also called the Hierophant, and this is also in tarot, for instance, or the Pope, where we see the keys. Now it's another reference we saw earlier in Kircher, Kircher's images, where we also saw the planets and the zodiac, as along with the cross staff and the pendulum symbols. Hermeticism, weights and measures, but again the triple crown. Now how does that connect? So the ancient Eleusian mysteries, the Hierophant was the chief priest of this Greek mystery school. There's a Ninian tablet which is very strongly connected to Demeter and especially to wheat. So that's a key symbol of the Eleusian mystery. Now Demeter, or Ceres in Roman, as in cereal, and the wheat, and this agrarian cult as they call it. So we see the Roman era aspect again. Now Persephone, which is a goddess of the underworld, so Mercury or Hermes was the only one who could travel between the underworld, and then we also, which has connections to Hermanubis, this other Greek Roman cult where it was a fusion of Hermes and Anubis. Anubis, the Greek god of the underworld, Hermes, the god of weights and measures, but also the trickster god who was able to travel between the underworld and the above. But also worth noting is the Palmet on top, did a series on these. And now Demeter, grain, well, also the Cornucopia being a symbol of fruits and grains, and it also would connect to grain, oil and wine, this important feature in cornerstone ceremonies. But Demeter and the Cornucopia, and this symbol of fertility and fruitful and prosperity. Now prosperity was also a name for Persephone in Roman. Now there are many similarities, many people have pointed this out, connections between the Eleusian mysteries and the Isis and Osiris cults, and especially the aspect of grain is an important feature in there, because Isis also represents the constellation, as we know, Virgo, which come to us through the Greeks, but they through the Babylonian, and again moving back through time. Now Isis scattered grains across, as she was running away from the god Typhon, she scattered grains across the sky and created the Milky Way, which is so this is the Udina circle in Winnipeg, which is an important city in regards to the mysteries and the continuation of these themes. And while fleeing the dreadful Typhon, Isis dropped a sheaf of wheat, just like Virgo holds. She holds a rod or a ruler and a sheaf of wheat, these being a symbol of measure, length, and measure of weight. And this has been a constant throughout time. But we go back to Kircher, for instance, and his work, and what do we have? Also Typhon and Isis. So again, these continuation of these older mysteries through to the so-called Christian era, which is just a continuation of these older cults. And it's just now, because there's been a big time separation, now Christians tend to think of them as separate, but they're not. They're so connected through the architecture, and the Bible itself is just so often referring to older schools, mystery schools, pagan, whatever you want to call it. But also the importance of the rod and the wheat. So grain is used also to measure length, and it's also used to measure weight. And we see this continuation of this symbolism, so whether it's through the Code of Hammurabi, back to ancient times, through to the modern period, where the royalty still carries these symbols, these powerful symbols. Also the importance of the symbols of the constellations, also the stories. I've more than a few times covered how especially the northern constellation is really just is, for instance, the story of Perseus, as embodied in the movies Clash of the Titans, tells a star chart, it's a story which embeds scientific knowledge as well. Now Virgo, which has the rod of power and the sheaf of wheat, which is directly above the scales of Libra. And that, I assure you, is no mistake, because throughout the constellations, the multiple references and crossovers between symbols of especially of science, of weight and measure, and how they connect in both the legends and well, yeah. Now this is a relief of Isis from Macedonia, which is a strong connection to the Eleusian mysteries. And just like Virgo, the rod of power and the sheaf of wheat. But what does this hat represent? What does this particular emblem represent? Well, it's the original caduceus, the wand, the rod of measure held by Hermes, as in Hermeticism. So the sheaf of wheat, just like Virgo, but we also see, but also the traveller's hat. Now that's an important feature. Now the Roman Mercury carries more, it looks like a World War One, or World War Two type helmet, but that's the traveller's cap because he's also the patron god of travellers, of navigation. He's also the god of commerce because people engaged in commerce need weights and measures. They need to navigate. They're travellers as well. So the aspect of the god, what he represents, and connects directly to these elements and these mysteries. Now Hermes, Hermeticism, these mystery schools, and the older Greek, Babylonian, and Egyptian ones just carries through. So now the caduceus, as we see now, is much different. This is here from Sydney, but you could get the Roman caduceus, and we see very different from the original version, although the meaning is exactly the same. Now, it's often said that this represents DNA. I strongly disagree. Firstly, because you would have to develop the sciences before you understood DNA, and so therefore you would need to measure. So the origin would just sort of logically, connect to there. I think it's a bridge way too far, where people, just like the light bulb at Dandera, where people are, or the Apache helicopter in Egypt as well, where we're projecting something on there. Now, the Sumerian one does look much more like the Roman one, but we see the Egyptian god of weights and measures and knowledge and science, just the equivalent of Hermes, does not have this. So it's stylized. And so Nuar and Fuzi, now some depictions have him and her in this DNA type spiral, but other ones do not. So, but we do see the commonality of their perp. So Nuar Fuzi taught people basically the skills such as fishing, but knowledge and writing, same aspect, and also the tools of geometry connected with them. And a DNA spiral does not match, so it's sort of close to this representation of Nuar and Fuzi, but the DNA spiral simply does not match this Kundalini, this caduceus. It's really, really a bridge too far to look at that. And again, it's much more advanced as compared to the origin. So it's like starting at fully developed and then going backwards. Well, okay, but maybe it could be. But anyway, I think it's really projecting something that isn't there because of modern discoveries. Now we go back to the Triple Crown and the importance. So we see Hermes, the caduceus, or Mercury, Mercurius, as in the element, the prima materia, Azoth in the Hermetic alchemical tradition, and the Triple Crown and how these older mystery schools connect. Okay, and so, yep, that's pretty much it, but again, I'll be going a lot more, but just as to start to look into some of these aspects where yeah, if you look at the bigger picture, I'm afraid that, this projection doesn't really hold up, neither in a logical sense, because we see that, well, the connections and the symbols, and we follow the actual ancient writings from the original writings. It's just not there. We see connections which are written and described and have been passed on, and then we see modern projections onto the alchemical tradition. And so just like the philosophers such as Plato would look at the natural world and then move on from there, the let's just call them the more mystical, spiritual aspects of alchemy, were looking at the actual reactions and the tangible, and then connecting spiritual aspects to them later. Like, again, just trying to, as above, so below. Not, yeah. Well, anyway, I'll go much more further into this, but yeah, we see the same connections, same drawings, and have a good one. Hello, Sacred Geometry Decoded, SGD here, and this will be Science of the Symbols Part 15, and we'll be looking at, well, drawing on previous videos and connections, especially between modern Christianity, but also ancient religions and mystery schools. And again, so back to Athanasius Kircher, this Jesuit, very prolific illustrator, writer, very important figure, and in this really chunky period of Hermeticism, and especially Hermeticism as in God of weights and measures, because things like the chain and a lot of the measure systems we have now were encoded in law around about this time, and also like a big growth in geometry and all these other features. But this Jesuit, how often he draws from pagan symbols, and so we'll be focusing on these two pictures of his and then looking at other connections, but the connections especially to alchemy and to, well, alchemy as in chemistry, and these so again the rebus and the fusion of the male and the female, the marriage of sun and moon again in these older alchemical texts. Now even they're manuals in a lot of ways. So focusing on these, and we'll begin with this figure here. So what we have is Hermes is carrying the caduceus. That's no mystery there, but also the hat that he's wearing now. Hermes, Hermeticism, was the Greek god Hermes, also called Mercury in Roman times, and he wears the traveller's hat because Hermes was the god of knowledge, weights and measures, commerce, and travellers, and he was a trickster god. But commerce, travelling, navigation, weights and measures, knowledge, and these blends in together. And so this is the older Greek, so the original Greek. Again, we see for instance, the wings on the caduceus and the wings on his feet. There's no, that's purely Hermes. Now that's the same feature, so the winged cap there, but carrying the caduceus. But this will also connect to Saturn, and so we see Saturn with the child. Now, Saturn, or Kronos, was the father of the Olympian gods. He's usually featured carrying the scythe, sometimes a bigger scythe, but he's always holding a baby because he ate his children. And, well, because of the Cornucopia, Zeus. I did a series on the Cornucopia where I talk about Zeus, but Saturn or Kronos. But he's also wearing this hat, so Saturn's wearing the hat. Now, this, of course, image has alchemical symbols in there, but even the lameness as well, which is a feature of arsenic and mercury exposure, which goes back to Hephaestus I mentioned previous, or Vulcan, the Greek god of metalworking. But a famous Saturn hat, or traveller's hat, is also worn by the Pope, and this will be a feature because the headwear of the Pope carries this ancient tradition, especially connected to the alchemical Hermetic tradition as well. So the Saturn hat. Now this is a more Roman version of Hermes, Mercury, as in the planet, but also the element, and the god Hermes carrying the caduceus, just so you can see there. But he's also wearing the traveller's hat. Now Hermes, the Romans will slightly variation, but that's an important feature of Mercury or Hermes, is this traveller's hat, as well as the caduceus, of course. Which will bring us to tarot, and I'll do some connections, but we have this tarot card of the magician. Now, notice the zodiac. Go back a little. Okay, so back to Kircher, we see the zodiac 1, 2, and 3 there. So this is another common theme throughout these Hermetic traditions, as well as the 7 heavenly bodies: Sun, Earth, Moon, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. These are visible to the eye, but they also have alchemical because they translate to elements as well. But the Saturn hat and the traveller's hat and the magician. So Hermes, or Mercury, god of knowledge, science, weights and measures, but he's also in commerce and travellers. But he's also a trickster god, and magicians need knowledge to play their tricks. And so the magician in tarot being represented by Hermes, the traveller's hat, the wings, and the caduceus. Now, it's not just in Catholic, so Ukrainian Orthodox, but other ones as well. They also carry the rod. Now, the caduceus was a wand given to him by Apollo. Wand translates in ancient Greek to measuring rod. or the reed, or it's what's in the Bible. You have the measuring rod, or measured by the reed, and etc. But it's also a symbol of peace and hope, and that's where the sort of snakes come in. But we see it also in Ukrainian Orthodox tradition. Now, you can just post Benny's head on there, or the Saturn hat, and the magician there, as we see. But now to the four elements: fire, earth, water, and air, which are embedded in, so this is Stephan Michelspacher. We have there Hermes at the top, sun, and the moon. We even have the crescent, Diana, the goddess there, but also those seven, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, Sun, Moon, and Mercury. But if you bring in this magician card as well, we also have the elements. So we have fire, fire, air in the clouds, water in the water, and also earth. Now, there's not easy to see. I don't think I couldn't spot it there myself. But what is nice is that we have this white and the red rose. We'll get to that in a second. But now this symbol here, now it's like basically it's a Mercury symbol, but it's also a fusion. So we'll zoom in on these. So there we see the Sun, Earth, and Mercury. So Sun, Moon, and Mercury, and the symbols of the Sun and the Moon and Mercury. And you can just see how. So we have Mercury, then we have the Sun. We can put that in the middle. We have the Moon, and we have the Moon crescent on there. The alchemical wedding of Sun and Moon, or silver and gold, electrum. But also it's featured there where the alchemical wedding with the Sun and the Moon, even the Sun and the Moon over the top there. And so you could almost get this Christian Rosenkreuz and the early Rosicrucians. You could, drop that image there. Also the Columba, the dove, nice one as well. But also like a standard Sol, Sun, Solar, and Lunar, Moon, and the mercurial symbol, the coitus, the marriage of Sun and Moon through Mercury, the primer material, as it's called as well, the basic element of transformation in these Hermetic schools. So the magician card also incorporates this alchemical wedding of Sun and Moon. Now it's also the red rose and the white rose, but also the rosy cross. So this Rosicrucian, old Rosicrucian symbol, also seems to be alluded to in there. But back to the papal hats, the traveller's cap of Mercury, the magician, and there we see there carrying the caduceus. But now that's Mercury, and who's the figure behind him? That's Apollo. It's even wearing the laurel. Ancient symbol there as well to the golden age of Apollo, but he's the sun god, and Apollo is the twin of Artemis, otherwise known as Diana, the moon goddess, and that's her there. That's the moon goddess Diana. Now she's not wearing the crescent, but that's Artemis. Now if you go to a Roman depiction and like more modern classical sculpture, we have Diana, aka Artemis, the moon goddess of the hunt as well. And she has the crescent there. But if you go to the older pictures of Artemis, and this Artemis cult, very important feature. So Artemis in Greek, Diana in Roman, the moon goddess. And there we see, so we can see, so that's another example of this old depiction of Artemis. Notice the oak as well, the seeds there, but also pay attention. So we have a zodiac there once again, the crab, the twins, Taurus, Aries as well. So there's all these little symbols always sort of blend into one another, and the more recent Hermeticists of the 15th, 16th, 17th century, Jesuits such as Kircher and Michelspacher, Jura, Khunrath, Fludd, and these other guys always embedding the same sort of knowledge. So it comes back to there we see Kircher and the moon goddess, sun, earth, and moon, sun and moon, the alchemical wedding of sun and moon via Mercury, the primer material. Now we get to this other tarot card, the Hierophant, or otherwise known as the Pope card. Now that will connect because, well, firstly, if we just zoom in on she's wearing a triple crown. Now, a triple crown is called the Hierophant, and so we see it in this tarot image as well. The Pope, now we look at, again back to Kircher's drawings. So we have the papal keys, this papal symbol, the silver and gold key. Silver is the moon, gold is the sun. Alchemical wedding once again. Now also this the Hierophant, the triple crown as well, which we can see there. And we also have the papal keys. Now they're in black and white, but that's the silver and gold keys, as were given to Peter as well, the keys to the kingdom of heaven, so to speak, as well. But silver and gold, alchemical wedding of sun and moon, and these alchemical images. And for instance, again, the pelican bearing her breast, which is and feeding the blood to her children, very reminiscent of the what's that bird? That magic bird, I forget its name. That right, that from its ashes rises the child. I'm sure you can remember. It's just on the tip of my tongue. But also what's he carrying here in this tarot? Well, we also see that in Kircher, the cross staff as well, a tool of measure again, which connects to Gunther and the chain and the mile and the foot and stuff as we know it now. Actually, ancient measures, but again, were brought back into law, just like Kircher was bringing these ancient traditions back and embodying ancient symbolism into the pagan symbolism into the Christian world. So was, well, this just carries on now. This is the papal tiara, as they call it, the triple crown, the 3 levels, which again connects to this depiction of Artemis and that tarot card, and also we can see it there in Kircher's drawing with the papal keys. Also worth reference, because this is about alchemy, and so what do we have? We have Sun and Moon and Mercury once again, but we also have Jupiter, Saturn, Venus and Mars. We see these symbols now. They're astronomical symbols. They reference ancient gods, and they also reference the elements. Now also in this card on the tarot, he's got the 2 fingers. Now that's the papal hand sign, the hand of benediction, or the preacher's hand, which is an important feature. Now I chose this one, older one, because he's wearing the triple crown. Slightly different version. There's more than one of these triple crown, but it's so important to papal dress. So again, the Hierophant, that's the triple crown. Which brings us to another Michelspacher drawing, and again, so we see, well, notice the dove again, and the presence of the columba, and also the tetragrammaton, the name of God there, but the alchemical wedding of sun and moon, the king, and the sun, and the moon, Diana/Artemis. And we also have the triple crown beneath there once again. The triple crown, Hierophant, and with another one of Michelspacher's alchemical illustrations. Same thing, what's his feet? Now we also have the zodiac. So we've got again alchemical symbols here. And we have the zodiac, so Leo, then with 3 others, and then Aries with the Pisces and the others, and then Taurus with Libra, for instance. But he's wearing the triple crown, back to that Hierophant, which brings us to the Eleusian mysteries, this ancient. So in ancient Greece, the Hierophant was the chief priest, the preacher's hand, or the preacher, the chief of the Eleusian mysteries, these ancient mystery schools. So the triple crown, the Hierophant, and the Eleusian mysteries, and this is just the beginning of the connections between, well, the Christian origin. So Christianity simply did not emerge from a vacuum. So many of the rituals and the traditions were carried on and just incorporated into from the pagan world. Christmas and Easter, for instance, I know it's very touchy for some people, but it was just incorporated in. It just really is it's a fact, really. Now, back to the Eleusian mysteries and Demeter, or Ceres, as in cereal, and the connections there. Now, what is Demeter here? She's the blessing, and look at her hand symbols there as well. Which brings us back to the hand of benediction, or the preacher's hand. Now, the Hierophant was the chief priest of the Eleusian mysteries and these mystery schools, which go back to Egypt. Now, well, we can just follow comparative studies of these things, and so back to Kircher and Artemis. So we see a couple of variations of the Artemis statue, but this one I think is the most interesting because we have 1, 2, 3, the triple crown, the Hierophant once more. Now Artemis, okay, now with the triple crown. Now we go to Ephesus in Turkey, and this is a reconstruction of the Temple of Artemis, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Very special place. Now it wasn't the temple itself, it was also the precinct around it. It was a treasury building, it was a university, it was a whole city built around the cult of Artemis. Now there's not much left, so that's what's left of it. Now even Anthony and Cleopatra, and well, on the steps of the Temple of Artemis, Arsinoe, the sister of Cleopatra, the last competitor for the crown of Egypt, was murdered on the steps of the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. This caused riots in Rome, and was one of the reasons why Cleopatra and Anthony died, or committed suicide, because it caused such a uproar that it ended their plan to take over the world. And it's interesting that they had their meeting. Okay, that's something else. But if you look into it, where Mark Antony and Cleopatra and where the plot was hatched to kill Arsinoe was at a philosophy school where St. Paul was born. And this is an important feature. So we have St. Paul, who preached against Artemis. So in Acts 19, St. Paul come to Corinth, and then he come to Ephesus and to the shrines of Artemis, and he caused a riot. And so great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So he was preaching against her, and he had to run away because there was a riot caused. Because, yeah, now why is that interesting? Because if we stay in Ephesus, what's called the Grotto of St. Paul, we have her female companion, which has been vandalized, and notice that's her fingers, but we still see the hand, the sign of benediction, which is part of this ancient cult tradition in the Grotto of St. Paul. So we see the same symbols carrying on again, which brings us to the Eleusian mysteries, but that's also connected to the Mithraic mysteries. And so this is pretty much a standard Mithras board. What do we have? The caduceus of Hermes, Apollo, the sun god, and the moon god Artemis, the alchemical wedding of sun and moon. Now this is which relates to the Phrygian cap as well. Did a video on these. I've done some on Mithraism as well. And this is also so this is a Mithraic board where we have the sacred hand of Sabazius, which has the same. That finger is being twisted up but we have these 2 finger symbols as well. But if we go, that's Sabazios there, and in the importance in the Mithraic school, we have the caduceus and Hermes carrying that again. And what do we have? Sun and the moon, Apollo and Artemis once more, and the hand of Sabazius. So this ancient symbol, these ancient mystery cults, have just been transferred into the Bible, and that's so much. Yeah, it's of pagan origins. So the Mithraic mysteries, the Eleusian mysteries, and the same symbols and the same themes, which connecting to especially papal symbols and headdresses and origins of those in the Bible too. And back to Artemis. Now I find this one interesting. I'm just a curiosity because the Kircher depiction of her seems to so we have the grain and there's a ring there. Now it's a bit hard to make out, but it seems to be alluding. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty, confident enough, but not sure. Where he's pointing the finger at these older mysteries, these ancient schools. This is an interesting drawing. Now, I couldn't find the name of the artist, but it seems to be, by the style of it, seems to be around the same period of Kircher and these older Hermeticists, and it's clearly Artemis there as well. But what I find especially interesting is that we have the furnace there underneath, and what we have is distillation, another alchemical reference, actually a double alchemical reference in there as well. Now the tools of alchemy were again in the background there. So, but what I could find is that they're claiming anyway that this is linked to Anna Perenna, where we get the term per annum. So at the Ides of March, there would be a big festival in Rome, attended by the plebs, and this was the New Year symbol. Now I also find interesting that whoever drew this one happened to place the fingers in the same Hermetic stance that you will find in so many portraits of these famous Hermeticists from this period of Kircher. Again, I did a series on hand signs as well, and again, multiple interesting connections, I think, that go beyond coincidence. Another one, so another depiction of Demeter, the grain, and the Cornucopia, and these Eleusian mysteries. And back to Kircher's drawing, and I did a series on the Cornucopia and the origins of it and how it's been still transferred into the modern time, especially through Freemasonry being one example that they've kept the old knowledge going. And so again, the Cornucopia, which also connects to Zeus, aka Jupiter, and the constellation Capra, and through, I did a series on Cornucopia. I'll try to remember to put a playlist in the description. But this will also connect to grain, oil, and wine. I've done a cornerstone series. I also did a standalone video on grain, oil, and wine, and how that connects through the Bible, Temple of Solomon, and also, again, ancient traditions, especially connected to building of temples, cornerstones, the stone the builders rejected, for instance, which again. And so that's pretty much it for this one. But what we see, just follow the path through, and through the ages and through the various cults and traditions and legends, what we find is the Hermetic tradition carrying through. So the symbols, but also, let's just say, the mythical with the scientific, astronomy, alchemy, or / chemistry, and this just being a way to embed this knowledge in almost like a hidden form, as if you're illiterate to the symbols, but you just follow it through, and it's still embedded in our modern our modern chemistry. And so this is part of a science, an ancient science, which especially incorporates, so whether it's you just look at a cathedral, whether it's the glass making or the metallurgy required to make the chisels, to also reinforcing chains, dyes, all what we could now consider industrial chemistry and all the aspects of it, they were doing at that time, but they weren't. Their universities were organized differently. Their papers, so their publishing systems were different, and in a much more symbolic sense. Now, they did also write, prolific writers, but these themes was one where, because we had a high rate of illiteracy back then, but a very high rate of symbolic literacy, as we're now symbolically illiterate, but in text we're very good, in graphs and this type of stuff we're very good, and it's sort of swapped over. But again, it's just the modern, we get so many of the establishment, let's just say, and the narrative is that, this is just all pure, gobbledygook or whatever. No, it's just a lack of understanding, and it's a bias that, a cognitive dissonance in a way that people don't want to know, because we want to think that we're the masters of science. We are, everything originated from the Royal Society and stuff, but no, it predates this period. And we can also, in the tarot cards and ancient gods and goddesses, and it really is all there. And this is, of course, going very quickly, but especially Hermeticism, tools of navigation. So, for instance, where we have the plumb line, or plumbum, as in lead, that being the element for Saturn, which brings us sort of to the Saturn hat as well, the cornucopia, the cross staff, and we see even musical scales, and the quadrant for measuring not only Earth-based measure, but also for measuring the stars and astronomy, and of course connections to the elements and alchemy. So alchemy is chemistry, and we see again all these. So it just really carries on through. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this one. There's a lot more to come because I'm really going through these very quickly. But if you look and study these things and sort of move away from the clickbaity alchemy, which is, I'm just not a fan of it because I don't think it really carries information, especially when it comes to Hermeticism and alchemy. There's a lot of kumbaya type of stuff, I have to call it. Now, I'm not, I'm a little biased in that way, but also I'm a little bit peeved about it because they're not really carrying forward the information. They're turning it into not turning it into something. They're just excluding the foundation stones, the major parts, the key parts in understanding this are simply not covered in most of the Hermetic or alchemical productions and books. And I hope that's one of the reasons why I'm making these. I hope to address this. The same with weights and measures and the origins of them. It's considered to be dry, but it's actually beautiful. It's carrying information, solid, measurable, testable information, as opposed to very subjective information. And when it comes to, a lot of his symbolism, it gets interpreted one way, but for instance, take your standard version of it and just insert smurfs in every time that there's this vague term, and then you can come to, you can insert anything into these things when it comes to analyzing pure symbols without looking at the scientific background of it. And they needed science. Science is not modern. Science is ancient, and it can be seen in the temples and in dyes and glass making and metallurgy and and medicines and all these ancient aspects. So we really haven't changed that much. This has been incorporated in various forms in the Bible, in tarot cards. Even these Christian scholars are clearly very, very interested in in pagan, because it was knowledge. It was not evil, demonic stuff. The only demonic, evil stuff would be those who would seek to demonize this and keep people in ignorance while claiming to be truth seekers or whatever. God knows what they're saying anyway. With that, hope you enjoyed and have a good one.